Welcome to Bart and Tart Talk About Art.
Bling, 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 bling.
Right, so this will all be edited out. So Simao, you have decided that you and I are going to talk about a painting from 1914, I believe, by Egon Schiele, the Austrian painter. As far as I can see from the title of the file, it's just called Standing Male Figure parenthesis Self-Portrait or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. From 1914.
And from 1914, exactly. And it features what we then have to assume is the painter himself wearing some kind of lavish yellow fur or something like that. And sort of looking sideways at the viewer. So, Simao, why did you pick this painting?
Yeah, maybe it's because he looks super gay. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
It certainly seems very flamboyant, doesn't it?
Yeah, very flamboyant. I like that. But anyway, I have a long story with Egon Schiele and with the duo of Egon Schiele and Gustav Klimt, actually, because I came up and I stopped up on the work of Egon Schiele, I may say, when I was a young, tender teenage boy. And actually, when I was 15, I watched a documentary of Gustav Klimt on TV, and I was, and then I became completely obsessed because, Gustav Klimt was all about, sex and drama and, beautiful figures, very stylized and all of that. And, for a teenager, that at least for me, that was like gold. And he uses gold as well, ironically, in his painting. And certainly. Egon Schiele was very good friends with Gustav Klimt.
Yeah, he was like his protege, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they are the biggest exponents. Is that a word in English?
I don't know. The biggest proponents, you could probably say.
Yeah, the biggest proponents, we can say, of a movement called Sécession. I think that's the way to say it. It's like Art Nouveau in French. I don't know what's the name in arts and crafts. I think in English that would be the term. But at least they are the Viennese version of that. They were also a little bit influenced by Sigmund Freud, which was also from Vienna, or at least from Austria, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
And anyway, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Klimt, but as I grew up, I started, my love for Klimt went apart. My love was gone. And I fell in love with the work of Egon Schiele.
Right.
Da-da-da-da.
Because he's sort of the punk version of Klimt, kind of?
Yes. He's way more raw. He's way more raw. Gustav Klimt, he also has some work that is similar, actually more similar to Egon Schiele. There are some museums in Austria that in Vienna that have like paintings of Gustav Schiele paintings of like women masturbating and stuff like that, very erotic paintings, and those drawings actually are quite similar to the ones, as far as I remember, they're quite similar to the Egon Schiele drawings and paintings and all of that, because Egon Schiele drawings are usually more minimalistic, more raw and more the shapes are more, more
distorted.
More distorted, more rough and tough. And Schiele usually it's a bit more sweet and more curvy. His drawings are a bit more curvy and all of that. And Schiele is more rough. Yeah, definitely more punk. Actually, in this drawing that we chose, it could be like, a little Sid Vicious
Hmm.
from what's the name of the band of Sid Vicious?
Sex Pistols.
That's right, exactly,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
famous band.
Yeah, but is
He
it?
looks a lot like a punk in his self portraits, actually. What were you
Hmm.
saying?
Oh, I was just saying that I agree with you that Sheila's paintings, they kind of look like if you take the Klimt paintings where the figures are sort of most distorted and most sort of gnarly looking, and then you remove all of that pretty patchwork like patterning,
Yeah.
then you kind of end up with a Sheila painting. One of the things I also found interesting about looking at his stuff was that they're called paintings, and everybody says they're paintings, but to me they're very much drawings. Like he very
Yeah.
much uses like he draws using an outline more than he sort of painstakingly renders shadow and light, right? Where
Yeah.
so he's kind of taking drawing, I feel like, onto canvas,
Hmm.
where I think traditionally, like you say, Klimt would make drawings, but then when he was making paintings, he would make paintings, and this feels like he's bringing a rougher kind of something that other artists might consider almost like a sketch. He's making paintings and saying this is the finished thing, kind of. And also, I think from what I understand, he was super prolific. Like he churned this stuff out. So it is sort of very rough and ready, very quick and dirty. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's a lot of what is refreshing about him as well.
That's right. And that's what makes him look so contemporary. I
Mm,
think, this guy, he painted this in 1914.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
Like it was made yesterday
Absolutely.
because of that, because he was not respecting a lot of conventions
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
He was the way he frames the figure. The legs are cut
Mm,
out of the picture.
mm,
The poses that the guy puts, the way he makes the hair completely crazy hair,
right.
the way he doesn't bother to put a lot of detail on the clothes and on the shaping, on the figure in general. It's
Right.
very just a few details. I mean, compared to his peers, like for example with Gustav Klimt, very very minimalistic style for that time, for
Yeah.
that period.
Yeah.
So actually, is it reminds me more of like fashion illustration.
I
His
agree.
drawings usually.
Yeah, I
It,
agree.
it could be, I think, probably, René Grouau. She's a very famous fashion illustrator from, I think,
Mm,
the 60s and 50s. I'm
mm,
sure he knew Egon Schiele. And that's also why I chose this drawing, and I chose to talk about Egon Schiele, because I think every art student knows Egon Schiele, because when we are studying life drawing, I
mm,
think every drawing teacher will
mm-hmm.
show you Egon Schiele,
Right.
and that's the thing, because I think he's the only person, or one of the very few people, that can make a whole career just on life drawing
Mm-hmm.
of just people. His
Yeah.
drawings are just one person
Mm-hmm.
in most of the time in a blank background, just super simple.
Right.
And
Right.
when as a student, as an art student, when you are drawing a figure, nude drawing or whatever, you know that most of those drawings, they will end up in the trash, or even if they're good, nobody really cares so much about them, right?
Right.
Because most of the times they're not that interesting. But his drawings are amazing.
True.
It turned one of the most boring academic things to do, which is to draw, just a person, a lot of the times naked, and that's usually so boring. And he made it super cool. His
True.
drawings look super cool. I mean, the pose of this guy that we are looking at right now, he looks super cool. He looks
Mm,
confident. He looks, sexy.
mm,
Super super cool. The you know it could be, I don't know, a rock star, super super cool, the poses that he chooses. I think it's also because of that, because in his drawings, not only the way he draws, but also the poses that it chooses the subjects to put, right, the way he puts the poses he puts the subjects in. They're super different, at least super different from the ones that the other painters from the times who do that. I think that's also why it seems more like fashion drawings, and also like fashion photography, because it's super elegant, and at the same time weird poses that you see like in fashion, that it seems, to, for example, this one that we're looking about, it seems that the highlight of the picture is actually the coat, right? Because everything is quite almost, there's a little bit of color in what he's wearing inside the coat, a little bit of green or whatever, but the rest is pretty much white, or beige or whatever, the color of the paper. And then you have this super vibrant color of orange color of the coat. So that's another thing that makes it look like fashion photography. But also, the poses that he chooses, I'm sure you've seen in fashion photography, the models like looking super super confident, and even a bit presumptuous, arrogant, and a bit, like if they're in the top of the world. And his drawings have that kind of vibe, that they look at you, the guy's looking at you, and it's defying the viewer. He has like drawings of himself masturbating and all of that. It's so punk, it's so subversive. It's super super cool.
It's funny because it's punk, and for me it's punk in a certain way, in that it sort of defies, the rules as they were at that time. Like, it's also like, if you look at like the hands, he generally draws really nice characteristic hands, but these hands are just sort of a mess of lines. Like, he doesn't give a shit, right? And I think that's actually part of why he's shown at life drawing classes, is also because here's somebody who you can tell he completely masters this craft, but he does it in a simple way where you, as somebody who's starting out drawing yourself, you can sort of see what's going on and what it is he's doing. It's not hidden underneath layers upon layers of refinement, right? But it's interesting because it's punk in the sense that he doesn't give a shit. But it's also, for me, it's not punk in the sense that that he's not... It's interesting that he's considered an early figure among the Expressionists, because for me, these paintings aren't expressing all that much, in the sense that these paintings are about, like you say, sexy, they're about cool, they're about appearances for me, but there's not much punk in the sense of, I have an urgent message to tell all of you people, it's punk in the sense of don't give a fuck, but for me it's a combination of punk and decadent, basically, which for me are typically not the same thing, right? Maybe I would even say it's like, for me it feels maybe even more like glam rock, like 70s New York Dolls type glam rock, like where
glam rock,
wear ladies' clothes and do lots of cocaine and play guitar loud and somehow badly, and sing about sex. It kind of has that vibe to it a little bit, to me.
Yeah, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. His drawings look like that, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And not necessarily very much... There's not necessarily very much... he doesn't have much on his heart, as we would say in Danish, necessarily. But of course, I mean, when you read about his life story, it feels like his whole life was like rebelling against the conventions of how you were supposed to live. Like, there was a lot, as I understand it, there was a lot of sex and a lot of general decadence. But yeah, it's interesting that the expressionist thing is interesting to me as well, because this is expressionist in the sense that he's taking liberties with how the human form actually looks, and he's distorting things. Some of it also reminds me a little bit of something like El Greco, in the way that he'll sort of elongate limbs and have these sort of weird, awkward poses, and so it's expressionist in that sense, but it's not expressionist in the traditional sense of expressing some sort of anguish or pain or existentialist dread or something like that. This looks like the paintings of a person who is just doing a ton of drugs and having a really cool time with his mistresses and, you know, his lovers and just rocking out and making cool drawings, to me, you know.
Yeah. And that's also why his drawings, it's just aesthetic. It's purely just pretty.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I mean, pretty in a rough way. That's the thing, because it's pretty, but at the same time it's rough. It's soft and rough at the same time, but it's not, you know, contrarily, for example, to the one that we were talking about last week, you know, the Georges Gros, no, not Georges Gros, the
Otto Dix.
Otto Dix one that you could not hang on the wall. I mean, all of his paintings, all of his drawings, you could put on a wall. All of them are beautiful. They're just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
They're just a feast for the eyes. So, of course, you know, when you're doing just feast for the eyes, you're not really caring about anxiety. I don't think so.
I don't think so either, no.
Even though apparently some of the poses that he made his models do, and also himself, because a lot of the times it was self-portraits, they were inspired on mental patients.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why, you know, the hands, the way they're put here, that's inspired. He does a lot of that because I've seen that they were almost directly inspired by mental health patients, like photos of mental health patients that had this kind of quirky positions.
Right.
And maybe that's why the only sign of like anxiety is in this kind of like awkward poses, the way the hands are, that's a bit, you know, introvert, and that's why it's cool, because it's a mix of like introvert and at the same time super confident, a confident introvert.
Yeah, true.
You know?
True.
So that's it makes it like cool. And the other thing is that you know, Klimt and other paintings and other people from, you know, the beginning of the century, they live there, and you know, people like them and all of that, but they live there. But Egon Schiele, there's still a lot of artists that are super inspired by his work. For example, Dave McKean.
Yeah. To be sure.
You know, the guy that made the covers of Sandman. I mean, the faces of the drawings of Dave McKean are super look a lot like for example, this drawing and all of that. And another thing that was quite revolutionary that you started mentioning a little bit in the sense of the draw, in when you mentioned that it's just like drawing, just rough and all of that. Something that is super contemporary is the notion of like process.
Right. Yes.
That the process the process is part of the final work, right?
Yeah, that you can sort of see the sketch lines in the finished piece.
Exactly. And in Gustav Klimt's paintings, for example, you don't see that. You know, the final version is usually super polished, super pretty, and all of that.
In Klimt, yeah.
Yeah, in Klimt. But so that's what I think that's what makes the drawings of Schiele super contemporary, is that sense of process.
Yeah.
And also another thing that is used until today, I don't know if it was him who invented that, but according to the information that I got, is that he would, I don't know if you knew about this technique already, but it's when you're learning life drawing, you do this a lot, which is to just look at the model without looking at the paper.
Yeah.
And then you don't take the pencil or the pen out of the paper, so it's just like a continuous line.
Right. Yeah, I read about that, and that's sort of, like the way in this painting we're looking at here, like the right eye, his left eye, but the eye that is to the, his right eye, but the eye that is to the left of us, is kind of is a bit of a mess of lines, same as the hands, and that if you use that technique, that would kind of, at least in some places, that would kind of explain why you end up with this sort of, kind of chaotic line work. Yeah.
And also why he ends up with this big shapes, big pure plain shapes. For example, the jacket is basically one shape. Right. It's just the contour. Seems like he was doing the contours of the jacket, and because he couldn't get inside, he just left the contours, and he focused instead on the hands and on the head and all of that.
Right.
This focal points he makes, the head, the hands, and the jacket in the sense of color, and then he leaves the rest pretty, minimalistic. Yeah. It seems almost like he was taking, again, a photo, those fashion catalog photos of, the model against a paper.
Yeah.
It seems that it could be something like that.
My feeling
I find
is,
that super cool.
I'm not an expert on this, but my feeling is that he didn't invent that technique, that was something that was already at that point used, because like you say, if you've been training classical drawing, you've been asked to do this exercise probably. And
now you are, but I'm not sure, because
I'm pretty sure that was something that was done as a training exercise back then as well. But that his innovation was more that he was using it for finished work, where back then it was considered like something you could do to train, something you could do in a sketch, but not really something you would do in a finished piece,
But if you see the sketches of old masters, Renaissance masters and Baroque, I don't think there's a lot of sketches of. There's not a lot of sketches of Renaissance masters anyway. No. But the ones that I saw, when you see those kinds of drawings, and even of Klimt, except the ones that he's drawing girls masturbating. The process, it doesn't seem like they were doing this. Right. That's why I'm saying that maybe he actually invented this.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know for sure.
I don't know either for sure.
One tiny biographical detail that might be extra resonant in these times as well is that he was killed by the Spanish flu in 1918, along with his wife.
Oh,
Edith Schiele. Or I think she died a couple of days, like 3 days before him or something like that. So
yeah, and that also makes him even more of a rock star, right? Because he died young.
Yeah, he was 28 though. He was 28, so he just missed Club 27, unfortunately.
Oh
for him.
My gosh!
Sad.
Even crazier.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see where he would go if he had lived on, because I think his life's work is very much of a piece right now. You did say at one point that his paintings were just one figure, etc. Like he does have paintings that are more than one figure, and he even has some environment studies. You wouldn't call that, like landscape paintings.
He does, yes. He has, as far as I remember, he has some very beautiful landscapes, or maybe not like landscapes, but like cityscapes. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, very beautiful. Yeah, very beautiful, because he applies this kind of blocky. Block shapes, but to the landscape. It's very beautiful.
Absolutely.
Indeed. But those are rarities. Absolutely. Those are exceptions.
Yeah, that was not what he sort of made his name doing. But it could be interesting to see what he would have done had he lived on, because
Yeah.
I think in that case, this would have been sort of a phase of his career, and he would have gone on to do other things. Just also judging by how quickly his style evolved in the
Yeah.
last sort of,
Yeah, but
in
equally
his
beautiful,
20s.
because I think his landscapes are just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
The ones that I've seen, and that's the thing with him. I can, go on to Tumblr or whatever and just keep scrolling and scrolling on his drawings. They're all just gorgeous.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
doesn't miss one. They're all beautiful. He never fails to make a beautiful drawing.
No.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I guess that's it probably, because as we've established, this is eye candy. This is he was one of a kind, and it's super striking and super cool and very inspiring to a lot of people. But there's not necessarily layers and layers, I think, of meaning there to talk about.
There is not, for example, in the one that comparing to the one that we analyzed last time, there is not much of a story.
No.
There is not much of a theme.
There's an
it's
attitude.
Just, what?
There's an attitude. That's what
There's an attitude, exactly. Yeah. It's a mood. Exactly. It's conveying a mood. It's cool.
Mood. Yeah.
Cool guys, so cool people, cool girls, sexy girls, and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes very controversial girls. Right. I don't know if you've seen the little girls, like girls. Like girls in their early teens that he drew. That's a bit creepy, actually. But at the same time, maybe it's creepy and disturbing because it's very beautiful. I don't know. It's quite weird. But I think that's also, I don't know if you also read that at some point he was put in prison.
Right.
Because he was drawing obscene stuff, and I think it might have to do with drawing very young girls.
Well, he was, as I understand it, he was charged with having improper relations with a 13-year-old girl, and also apparently his parents were quite worried when he was a boy about his relationship with his younger sister. There is this story where they're in a room and they've locked the door, and the dad breaks down the door to make sure they're not doing improper things in there. But I mean, they were exposing a photograph, so not that much impropriety going on. But yeah, maybe their suspicions may or may not have been founded. Who knows? I mean, and I think the eroticism of it is definitely, like, there are some of those poses that are like, porn magazine poses, basically. Girls on all fours, and so it's definitely, I think even to this day it is kind of, I wouldn't say shocking, but it is kind of, it's in your face, the eroticism of these drawings.
But most of those people that are more in your face poses, it's grown up women.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just talking about the
usually,
general.
I think. Yeah. The ones that are usually more obscene are self-portraits of him masturbating.
Right.
For me, those are the most obscene ones.
Yeah.
But the one that the one that I clearly remember is, at least I remember one picture. I don't know if he made more, but it was like this very, very young girl, and she was in an awkward pose. It was not. I'm not sure if it was like completely erotic.
No.
But what I thought was that, if it was today, if a grown-up would draw or photograph a little girl like that, completely naked and in that kind of pose, that thing would not go well.
And also
at all.
And also in the context of the other studies he's doing, right? It does maybe give you pause, I would think. But yeah, God punished him with the Spanish flu, so
yeah,
that matter has been settled.
I guess so.
And in posterity we can enjoy the paintings, I guess, except maybe for the ickier ones.
Yeah. That's true, but it's a bit, in a whole other level. It's a bit like Caravaggio,
right.
Caravaggio has this paintings of like young boys and babies and all of that are very disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like yeah, it's basically eroticizing children, and yet the painting is so well done. It's very disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's these two different layers. This paradox of like disturbing but beautiful, but disturbing but beautiful.
Absolutely. And also, I
And
think
I think
there's a
what?
sorry, I think there's a whole thesis to be written about changing attitudes through time towards children and how you can depict them
Yeah,
and how they have been depicted. I think it's probably challenging. It's probably a tricky path to go down to look at those paintings with modern eyes, because they could very well have meant different things back then, or maybe not.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or maybe not. I remember reading not about Schiele, but about Caravaggio. I remember reading that he was actually at some point persecuted for trying to allure very young boys. So that was
Caravaggio.
one.
Caravaggio.
Caravaggio, yeah, Caravaggio.
Yeah.
And Schiele, I think people would marry when they were like 14 or 13 or whatever. So I think you're right. But when it's like a 9 or 8 or 10-year-old girl, I think probably even then people would be like, that's maybe not so cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
Yeah,
you are right.
maybe.
And like we just said earlier, he was prosecuted at one point, even though the charges were dropped.
Yeah.
And generally, wherever Schiele went, people around him, the bourgeoisie did not approve of his behavior, and some of that, I'm sure, was them being stuck up. It might also have been that some of that was that there was some questionable behavior going on. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, both those things can be true.
A lot of rock and roll, too much rock and roll, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, rock and roll was never some of rock and roll's excesses were definitely icky when you look back at them as well. So decadence comes at the price of somebody. Typically, that's the way it is.
Yeah. It's that thing of the excess, right?
Yeah.
And the excess of rock and roll.
Right.
It's cool, but it's when it's too much. When you're too inebriated in your subversion or in your fun and excess. It can that's what excess is. You get you do crazy stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's that I feel like stuff like that sort of, and I think Schiele probably in his own time served this function of being somebody that other people, like the normies, could look at him and go, wow, that's so cool that he's so uninhibited and he's just doing whatever the fuck he wants. And you can sort of dream about, walking that plank and being all out there. I'm not sure if you're around the people who live like that. I'm not sure that's necessarily wonderful. I'm not sure that those people are necessarily wonderful to be around, because I think there's a fair amount of self-centered behavior baked into that. He had this mistress, Wally, who modeled for him for a lot of paintings. But when it came time to marry, he married a girl who came from a family with money for convenience. I'm not sure being part of his sort of hedonistic, decadent life, if that was what it was necessarily that amazing. But for us looking at it now, dreaming about, engaging that side of, or just sort of engaging is not the word I'm looking for, but dreaming of living that kind of life, like as sort of a daydream. I mean, I think it's harmless, right? And I think that's part of the function of, rock and roll artists like Schiele and rock and roll musicians in the 60s and 70s, right? There are these sort of icons of decadence. You don't necessarily want to be them really, but you can dream of that while you live your normal life. That's probably in some ways more harmonious and pleasant when it comes to it.
Yeah, it's like a character, you know. You see,
Exactly.
people regard them as a character, you know. People want to be them, but just for 10 minutes. They don't want to be them, you know, 24 hours a day
Yeah, exactly.
because they're narcissistic and toxic and all of that. And he definitely, besides the things that you said, you know, a guy that would make so many self-portraits and, you know, a lot of them, you know, masturbating with a gigantic dick and all of that, you know, he definitely had a very big ego.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
very narcissistic guy. So I don't know how cool it would be to be his friend, but I understand that Gustav Klimt liked him a lot because Gustav Klimt also seemed to have that kind of, you know, big ego. So
Yeah. It seems like they were fairly similar in just the amount of sort of mistresses they went through and their general preoccupation with their groins and other people's groins, to be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it takes, you know, a rock star to enjoy another rock star's company.
I think so too.
I think the common mortals cannot endure that kind of friendship.
No. And it probably also helped that Klimt was, you know, older and more established, so they could have this sort of mentor-mentee relationship. They didn't have to fight about who was the big dog, because Klimt obviously was the big dog, and then he died before Schiele could really, I guess, sort of start competing with him about being, you know, the biggest artist of them all. So
yeah, but also the other thing is when you have a protege, even if they make it really, really big, even if they at some point become almost bigger than you, as I would say Schiele kind of became. But
after Klimt died, though. But yeah.
But the thing is, when that happens, it's good for your business because it means that you created a movement.
That's true.
You know, and so you have a lot of artists that their work is referring to yours. So you kind of, you know, the OG, the original, you know.
That's true.
And, you know, buyers will buy you because they think, oh, this guy is essential for the, you know, he created a whole movement and blah, blah, blah. So if you are the one, if you are older and you're inspiring younger artists, it kind of doesn't it can only affect your career positively, I would say.
I think you're right.
That's why, for example, you know, Andy Warhol, he made some collaborations with Basquiat to try to stay hip and all of that.
Yeah, and you know, in modern pop culture, you have people like Madonna doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they would do that probably back then as well.
I'm sure they would. All right.
Yeah.
But I guess that's it for Schiele.
Yeah.
So thank you, Simao.
Thank you, Eric.
And talk to you later.
Yes.